relationship with former FBI Director James Comey.
This as he leaves for his first overseas trip. Our political analyst, Wendy Patrick, Laura Fink, now join us with more. Ladies, good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Sally.
All right, let's start talking about the New York Times. According to them, Comey, unsettled by the president, wanted to keep his distance from him, and he was even hoping the president wouldn't spot him at the events. And there's video of it. Laura.
Well, I think the more important revelations, and I know Wendy's going to talk about him trying to fade into the curtains as a 6'8" individual, which is difficult to do.
I didn't realize he was that tall, by the way, very tall.
He's 6'8". So that was just the best visual out of the revelations. But what we found out was that James Comey attempted to assert his independence and wouldn't essentially pledge his loyalty. This was right after the loyalty meeting, and then he uses that physicality to try to pull him in and assert that dominance. But what we also found out in that interview was that not only was Jim Comey pressured to drop the Flynn investigation, he was also pressured not only by Trump directly, but also by Reince Priebus, the chief of staff, to come forward and publicly state that there was no investigation of Donald Trump or his campaign, which of course he could not do. But that contact and that pressure, if it in fact happened, really breaks precedent with respect to how that should go about. And no president and no chief of staff should be putting pressure on the White House about how to handle an investigation. So just another shoe dropping yesterday.
Okay. Wendy, was he really trying to hide behind the curtain?
Well, according to him, absolutely. And I know that's ironic being 6'8", but he said he was trying to literally blend into the curtains. He didn't even want to go to that meeting, according now to the revelations made by a good friend of his, not because he didn't want to support the president, but because he didn't want to have an appearance of impropriety of being too close to the president. Actions speak louder than words, and that footage, I could analyze that for the whole hour you have of news this morning. Everything from the awkwardness on Director Comey's face, he puts out that enormously long arm to try to create that distance. What does the president do? Pulls him in right after having started with an air kiss. Why else is this important? It's important because a lot of times we attribute to the president evil motives of trying to influence investigations when sometimes he honestly is totally unaware of how inappropriate some of his behavior is. And this footage really illustrates, now this was at the beginning of his presidency, but really illustrates that fact that sometimes it's not so much as a lack of candor, but a lack of competence in knowing the rules.
Okay, yesterday during the news conference with the president of Colombia, they were waiting for the news conference and the questions to start. And then he was asked about the FBI investigation, the president was, and he said, no, next question. Shoved it along and kind of moved it. The reporter didn't seem to mind, and everybody now is talking about that, but isn't that the way it's been pretty much since he took office, Wendy?
Oh, well, absolutely. You know, one of the good things he did is that he had a single word answer. That would be something that his supporters were probably breathing a sigh of relief. One of the other answers he gave, though, illustrates the whole problem with him talking as much as he did. He said, talking about the collusion allegations, he said, I always can speak for myself. The Russians, zero. What does that even mean? And that's indicative of a lot of the things he says. They're not complete sentences. They're often taken out of context. There's a juxtaposition of words that come back to bite him. So if we analyze some of the more questionable allegations swirling around his presidency, we often find more demonstrations of that. So it's probably a good thing he stuck with a single answer, no.
What struck me is that the president kept picking himself in terms of me. Is some legal analysts yesterday in all the shows I was watching were saying, well, that's somebody that's trying to line up some sort of defense, some sort of legal defense. Does that kind of line up with your experience?
Well, I think I'm no prosecutor, but I can tell you that the English language does apply to everyone, and your public statements will be brought into the court of law and will be brought into the investigation because they are all material evidence as you make them publicly. What I will say is that with Robert Mueller, we have a Bronze Star decorated former Marine who is the longest serving FBI head in our generation, certainly, gosh, maybe other than Hoover. And so he has served both a Republican and a Democratic president 12 years and really has a sterling reputation for in the wake of September 11th, reforming that entire department. This particular investigation could really not be in better hands. And so Donald Trump needs to worry about those statements because he's going to, FBI Director, Robert Mueller will play this by the book. So all of those statements, and that's why Trump is not used to being chastened. He's used to saying whatever he wants, whenever he wants, regardless of accuracy, regardless of his previous statements. But all of that is going to be relevant now as the investigation gets the heat turned up.
Wendy, I'll let you have the last word. Joe Lieberman, what do you think of that?
What a questionable selection. I don't think anybody saw something like this coming, and I think that
Well, he's independent now.
He's what?
He's independent. He's
Well,
not...
right, yeah. Oh, that makes a big difference. But I also think that the president, again, like he miscalculated the bipartisan blowback in firing Director Comey, I think he also miscalculated the reception that a selection of Joe Lieberman is going to receive, talking about he's going to get 100 votes in the Senate. Now they're saying he doesn't even think he's going to get 50 votes in the Senate. So I think we've got to look back past the fact that, remember, Lieberman did support Hillary Clinton, but also supported John McCain. And there is a lot of talk that a politician is not a good choice to head the FBI.
Okay, until the president is off on his first overseas trip, we'll see what happens. We'll chat about that next week. Laura, Wendy, thank you both.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks,
Have a
Earl.
good weekend.